interwebs, and I'm now learning. I'm pretty sure once this comes across, we're now officially live.
Bam.
Because social media says we're not entirely. But I think to officially start us out, we should all wave to the camera. Hello, everyone listening. If you are listening live, we encourage you to comment. I will be kind of on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. So ask away questions. It's always fun to have that when we do this on our weekly Wildfire Wednesday. This is I don't know, I've already lost count of how many times we've been doing this today, but we have a special crew here, and I'm really excited to be alongside my co-host, Eric Litzenberg, along with Mark Novak and Dr. Lori Moore-Merrill, to dive into all things fire, wildfire, tech. I don't even know where this conversation will go, but I'm excited.
Movies, 1980s movies.
Canadian national anthem. I don't know.
A little bit of everything.
We'll see. But yeah, I'll Kevin Sofin, technology advisor at IFC, and very grateful to be here. And Eric.
We'll continue around the corner. I'm Eric Litzenberg. It is a great pleasure to have you two here. I'm from City of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm now at the IFC's Wildfire advisor, and I'll pass it for an intro from Mark.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and it's great to be here with such a great crew. Feel honored. My name is Mark Novak. I'm currently the fire chief in Vail, Colorado.
That's good for an initial intro. And Dr. Lori, an initial intro, and then we're going to dig into some deep questions.
Hi, Lori Moore-Merrill, former U.S. Fire Administrator, and a huge fan of these three guys sitting in this booth. So Kevin, Eric, and Mark, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
It is mutual admiration. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to go back to you, Dr. Lori, because you, as you said, you just gave your introduction. You've had a very recent career change and you're getting into tech. Awesome. You were also recently the fire administrator. What got you to that? Give us your deeper background into how you ended up as the U.S. fire administrator.
Wow, this is only an hour, right? So I will I'll give you the brief version. So thanks for that question. So I started out in the fire service in the late 80s, and I appreciate people not counting at that point. But anyway, I went on the job in Memphis, Tennessee, and back in the late 80s, and spent 7 years on the job there, and was recruited to the IAFF as the first EMS specialist with the IFF. And so that was at a time when we were seeing a lot of changes in fire-based EMS. If you remember those terms, we don't really use it anymore because it's become a foregone conclusion that firefighters do EMS. That's what we do. It's an all hazards capability. So I love to see that evolution. We can mark so many evolutions, can't we? And so that's really where I started, and then evolved into research and doing a lot of research around crew size and working toward the standards like 1710 that we had some conversation around this morning in one of the sessions, and really spending time helping firefighters be safe and healthy. So a lot of what I've done on the operational side has been to have a ramification of health and safety beyond, just the operations. And everything we do, yes, we want to be good, but we want to be efficient, we want to be effective, we want to be safe. And so with that, continued to evolve in that space for a good bit of time at the IFF, 26 and a half years.
Wow.
Where I did a lot of data work, and really began around 2005 to work around better data. We needed better quality data. We needed more accurate and greater volumes of it. And all we had was the INFIRS database at the time, right? And everybody knows the National Fire Incident Reporting System is our legacy system. And so even back as far as 2005, I was starting to talk about, okay, we can do better. And we really need to have something different, because all of that is important to how we bring safe, efficient, effective operations, right? All of it contributes. But if we don't have the information to inform us, how do we do that? So that's been my life for a long time. I left the IFF and started the International Public Safety Data Institute based on that. We developed a couple of big data analytics. You don't hear big data anymore. We hear AI, but big data was on its way to being AI, because we were trying to fuse the data and then mine it with some built algorithms, and that has led us to more AI use. So you guys can see sort of an evolution in the data space. And so today, that sort of, it led me to an opportunity with President Biden to become the U.S. Fire Administrator, and put me in a position where I could make the change in our national data system. And I could set the path for shutting down our legacy system. God bless it. We'll have a memorial. But we needed a new platform that had real live capability for data fusion, near real time delivery of information for you as chiefs to make real decisions. So that's been my path. And I sort of highlighted my priorities along the way. And here we are with Nearest. And so big shout out to the Nearest team and how they're forging the way forward with a vision that actually began way back in 2005.
Right. Shout out to Nearest, and thank God there was a vision for this, because for those of us who have been sort of along for the ride, we're glad the legacy system is becoming the legacy system, and we're glad that there's a vision that was put into place and it's getting into product, which is Nearest. And so, Mark, going to you for a second as a local fire chief, and you don't get to just stop it there, because we're going to have to talk a little bit more about what you do, because you're not just the Vail Fire Chief. You're the chair of the Wildland Fire Policy Committee. You serve, and you served for a number of years with Dr. Lori as part of the Wildland Fire Leadership Council, among other policy groups. You guys are making things happen in the wildland space. So as a fire chief, what's the promise of Nearest to you? What's going to change in your view?
Well, thanks, Eric. And first of all, I apologize I didn't bring my water bottle because it has a big sticker that says data is the new bacon.
Oh, I love that.
So, so I wish I had that here. So
That would have been nice. Yeah. Yep.
Great segue there. So yeah. So what is the promise of Nearest? I mean, I think for years we've been saying we need to be data driven. We need to use that as a foundation for how we deploy resources, how we protect our community. So it both has an operational piece and kind of a CRR piece, but we've had a really hard time of having actionable data. And I'll steal a little bit from Dr. Lori. We've had electric vehicles now for 15 years, probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't code an electric vehicle fire in NFIRS. And so having something that can evolve real time. Yesterday, Dr. Lori was gracious enough to come spend some time with the Wildfire Policy Committee. And we talked a little bit about how Nearest could be used to really tell our story. And so that story that we were trying to discuss was, it's 2025, right? And we still can't really give a really good answer of how many wildfires do local government firefighters respond to? How many initial attacks are solely local government firefighters that the federal agencies never show up on? How many resources are we supplying to that effort? And then, even some more basic questions. We have some data and it gets updated occasionally. I kind of laugh because every discussion we go to, we talk a little bit about the nation's, 29 or 30,000 fire departments and the 1.1 to 1.4 million firefighters and the 68 to 70% volunteers. And anyway, so you get the picture, right? So we're trying to tell this story and make this case, and we're kind of making stuff up, right?
Yeah.
We're using experience.
No.
So they're educated guesses. And
Yeah.
I played back. That was a little reach back for Eric because we were talking about MSU yesterday. And that is making stuff up. Right? So stuff, absolutely.
Another phrase, R&D, research and develop, is actually rip off and duplicate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So that's
Perfect.
some of the promise, but certainly it's been how to tell the story is really important, especially in this day and age. And I think some of the things that we've seen happen in the fire service really in the last year that maybe we're lamenting or we're really trying to claw back or change has been because we haven't told the story well and we can't quantify it. So we don't have a good value to the money that's being spent on lots of different initiatives, whether, the National Fire Academy or wildfire mitigation or the role of local government and wildfire, lots of things that we're not quantifying well, and we're not identifying where we can best spend money, effort, and other resources in the future.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. So I'm going to take a detour for the watchers and listeners. If Dr. Lori's popularity isn't evident to you, it's because they can't see the number of fans who keep walking past and nodding and pointing and waving.
Just go, but I feel now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Feel free to wave.
I'm very grateful.
Mark and I and Kevin are trying to take credit for it, but they're ignoring us totally. They're looking in the corner. Anyway, okay, so I know I don't want to spend the whole time on NERIS, as important it is. There's just too many juicy things to talk about. However, I think it's important when you're looking at a conference like this and the constituents we talk about to understand that you all just described something that's really important for the big picture. If you're a fire chief, if you're an administrator who's trying to tell the public something or trying to tell a decision maker, a legislator, something, there are people who are inputting this data somewhere. And in my opinion, as a past fire chief, one of the biggest weaknesses was we couldn't get people to put in good data. And that's sort of what is NERIS going to address that somehow? Are there things that are happening? And maybe Dr. Lori, you know enough. And if nobody knows enough about the technology, that's okay. But I think I've heard things about how the input portion is different, and people would probably love to hear that as well.
Absolutely. Yes, it's going to be different because one of the things that we discovered and just looking at and analyzing MFERS data over years is the anomalies in the data. And that's how we knew it was poor quality. And then as we started, I mean, you'd have crew sizes of 10, right? Just because somebody is just putting in whatever they can put in. And then we would identify and talk to firefighters or officers along the way at the station level. And you'd identify these anomalies because we could analyze it and see that literally every fire they make, and I won't point out the department, but every fire they make went beyond the room of origin. All of them. They burned it all down every time. And so we know that's not true. And then you'd have another department that we would analyze with the data and you would see a portion of what they knew. And this particular department would have over 6,000 fires a year. I mean, they're still in the rust bucket. I'll give you that much of it. But cities where a lot of fire still happen, structure fire, and their data would show about 700 a year. And then you'd have a fire chief screaming at the analysis going, we make a lot more fire than that. What did you do? Hold on a second. We didn't do that. Your data is that. That is what your data are telling us. And so we begin to see the human error. And we know that firefighters, it trickles down. Lowest guy on the totem pole gets to do the data and in a lot of places. And they were never trained. And so you would see the stickers on the computer saying, click that, and that way you don't open up another window. You just need it all to be green and right. And so we had this and it became comical because I could see it in any audience and you guys know you do that and everybody would laugh and shake their heads and it was accepted. We can't do that. And so one of the premise of NERIS is that we reduce human error, plus we train them and it is developed with the users in mind. And so the data schema, the definitions, all of these things have been done with firefighters along the way. And let them tell the story. NERIS is the storytelling. And wherever we can find the data exists, then why have them put it in again? Why would I need the information off CAD? How many of you had to call and get your response time at the dispatch office and then put it in the record, right? It happens all over the country. No, if it's there, let's automatically load it. If you're risk environment, you have to describe the building, got to describe the address. No, that exists. Why would I have you re-enter it and get the address wrong? Because we could only geocode 80%, by the way, of MFERS data. So these are the kinds of things that we have made the changes in NERIS that cannot then be human error, right? And so that's where I think we're going to get accuracy, we're going to get precision, we're going to see things in the nation around the fire problem that we've never seen before. And by the way, I think it's going to be in the interface. I think we're going to see the risk environment where we put in communities, and both of you have them in your own jurisdiction. Communities that have been built right smack in the path of fire. They have one road in. It might sprawl out after they get in there, but into the community, there's one road. So evacuation is going to be limited. So these are the kind of things that I think because of the geospatial environment, and shout out to Esri as a great partner, and it's built on a geospatial platform, that we're going to see things that are going to be, first of all, fire problem. Second of all, risk that you have not noted before, but the system will begin to highlight for you.
Yeah.
Population vulnerability, all of those things that you're going to see things and patterns. That AI, by the way, that's going to be installed in some of the algorithms to watch for these patterns. You're going to see things you haven't seen before.
And Lori, I want to expand on that and get both your thoughts on this of where you mentioned, earlier data and then AI came up quickly and you hear these big buzzwords like LLM. And I think to the regular firefighter or regular fire department, some of those terms are kind of over their head. And I'm curious from like a NARIS perspective of like, what does it actually mean from an outcome perspective? You mentioned like not having to redo some of the reporting stuff. And I was trying to simplify in the sense of like, this allows you to save time so you can save that hour that you were at the fire station and go home and make sure that you're making your kid's soccer practice. It's helping you save a little time here. It's helping you story tell better so you can get more funding to do X task. If you were going to kind of communicate again, give like what the outcome of NARIS is in both of your words, like what are some of these outcomes that you see NARIS helps drive allow the fire service to accomplish?
Mark, you go first because you're as a chief. What do you hope for? You may not even know that that's going to happen, but what do you hope for as a chief that this is going to deliver to you?
So I think there's a lot that, that we'll learn as we go, and we'll start to realize some of the things you just mentioned that, wow, this is helping us detect patterns and identify risks. So I think those are all really important. I think about our community, and we have, we're a atypical community. We're a resort community. We have different kind of residential patterns. So it'll be really interesting to be able to start making some connections between, temporal patterns throughout the year of visitation, of residency, different natures of different types of incidents. So I think we're hoping that, we'll have a better understanding and just take that one step further. We have a standards to cover community risk assessment, and it's, pretty high level. And I think this is going to give us some detail that didn't give us. And again, that's what it's really all about is matching resources to risk. And ideally taking that a step further. We always think about, okay, we've matched the resource to the risk, but let's now invoke, the CRR model, and let's get in front of that risk and let's start to make a difference for the future of our visitors and our citizens and change those outcomes and prevent those things from happening.
I love that. I don't need to extrapolate on that one bit because that is exactly what the intent is that a fire chief would have the information to make intelligent decisions about your own community, where the risk and hazards are. Or let me say hazards first, then risk, right? Risk are related to the hazards that already exist. And so what is that risk environment? How do you, whether it's a sprinkled property or not sprinkled property, one's risky, one, right? One has had some mitigated risk. And so we think that through. What if it is an interface? What if it is a high rise? What if it, all of these what ifs every jurisdiction will have some of that. And then you put population over top of that, right? And so we keep adding these variables that contribute to the risk environment. And then for you to be able to see that in a place that can be calculated, that you can have some insights around, all right, if I do A, then C, right? If I do A plus B, then C, I can get these outcomes. And now I can see prioritizing where my limited resources can be engaged in that CRR, right? I can't do it all. Where do I start? And so you'll have the data to prioritize that as well and make those decisions. So love what he said.
Yeah.
And we can do that without a data analyst.
And you can do it with a God bless a data analyst. Let's not give them up because you still need some interpretation. But NARIS is going to give you the capability, and there will be a constant evolution of new algorithms placed against the data. In other words, queries. What questions do you have? What do you want to know? You call the NARIS and folks and the team at UL and you say, listen, can we do this? They are going to create an algorithm, and not only will your idea apply to your data and give you a new opportunity, everybody will have your idea, right? And be able to apply it against their own data. So this is, to me, the really rich stuff of how we help each other. Your ideas can now help him because you thought of something. And so just the intuitive and the reasoning nature of our fire chiefs are going to matter. You're going to have answers to questions that your mayors or city councils or county commissions or supervisors, whoever your hierarchical decision maker is, have asked you, and you answered a different question than they asked you. Have you had that experience?
Absolutely.
Because you answered what you could answer and tried to do the proxy for what they actually asked you. This is where I think you all are going to have real gold out of this system is to actually answer the questions you're asked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got such promise. I'm gonna, if you guys will give me the grace of adding one thing to this, right? Because and I'm no longer a fire chief. I'm now a retired fire chief, but I stay connected to the response folks. I can say for 25 years of being a leader in the fire service, probably one of the biggest complaints that I heard from the troops was entering things that weren't making a difference. And you just talked about you want your decisions to mean something. I think everybody who gets in our business wants their action to mean something. And the promise that the stuff that I'm putting into this system is ultimately going to get into Mark's hands. Mark is going to be able to make a decision about it, which he can then, tell a budget person or an analyst in another department saying, this is why we need to change these things. Or they can have a community developer say, this is why we need to build the road this way. And then it can get to somebody sitting in your seat saying, from a national policy level, this is why we need to make investments the way we do. This is why we have to create a policy. That is what people want. And I think for a long time, we felt like that's not what we got. You would always hear firefighters saying, sure, I'll do it, but it doesn't do anything. It's just time wasted. So it's so great to have, the idea that it's going to mean something now. I think everybody in the system says, heck yeah, let's do this.
And it's dynamic.
Totally.
Eric, so it's not just a one and done, but it's like you brought up earlier, Mark, the lithium ion, they were coded as hazmat, vehicle fires, chemical fires, electric fires, right? So all of these different coatings, no more, just say it was a lithium ion battery, right? We know the chemical makeup of that. We know the, explosive nature. We know all of the stranded energy. We know all the runaway, all of those things. What if we have, one of the things I laugh at this, you're going to laugh too. One of the data points that's starting to come out is just a little bit of data. And I say a little bit, it's actually quite a bit data in the near system already. They're seeing some patterns and they've documented some frozen chicken truck fires. Now think about that for a second. Did you know we could potentially have a frozen chicken truck fire problem? All right. So this is, see, I told you you're going to. Right?
Mark's talking about them all the time.
So this is, make it up, flying saucers, in 2 years, whatever our issues are, we're going to see them quicker. We're going to be able to adjust and go, hey, wait a minute, I'm seeing some patterns here. And we're seeing it, in the central US, so we're seeing it across the South, we're seeing it in the North. We'll be able to spot patterns. COVID, I think with our EMS call volume and the respiratory distress and some of the other things that we saw in COVID, after we looked at the data, we would have seen them before and note these things were happening, right? So this, I think, is the power.
It is the power. So next FRI, Mark, we expect you specifically to do a chicken truck fire presentation. So mark it now.
I think we actually have had a chicken truck fire.
There you go.
Cover Vail Pass and we have a lot of truck fires.
Yeah.
But I love what Dr. Lori said. I think back to kind of like the 3 levels of situational awareness and really being able to see not what's happening and not only understand what's happening, but see over the horizon and see what's coming at you with that pattern recognition you're speaking about with COVID is really important. I think that's one of the problems with the fire service is, even though when we try to be proactive, we're still reacting to like, okay, we're on our 10th chicken truck. Maybe this is something real, and identifying those patterns early and changing what we do is so powerful. So
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Moving off of chicken trucks, but into like trends that we're all watching. Refrigeration, right? Refrigeration trucks. It's so good. Chicken truck. So, Dr. Lori, in January, we saw you on the ground in the LA area with Eaton and Palisades. And if we look over the course of 4 years, numerous times saw you on the ground, seeing what's happened. There's this emergence of conflagration. We're starting to accept as a profession what that means. And I would love to explore that. And Mark, you too, we do talk the policy of conflagration. Everybody's starting to say the term. What has your experience been as the administrator on the ground, seeing these things? And both of you, what's the general trend in our nation around conflagration and solutions?
I think that, and I said this in your committee yesterday, but I'm going to say it again. I think that the LA fires have changed many things in it. We're really not completely understanding what that means just yet. I think the first of those is going to be around the window of opportunity to change behaviors in people. And one of the things that we learned, it became common vernacular after the LA fires, was ember cast. We didn't hear it, although the fire service talked about ember cast in Lahaina, but because the footprint of that fire, it was so intense, the radiant heat spread, that there were some ember cast, but the flames were rolling as well. And the building materials there that were so combustible, everything that just contributed to that conflagration so fast. We didn't get an opportunity for media to even pick up on the notion of ember cast. If I go back a couple years before that in the Marshall Fire, we know that was a conflagration as well. It started as a grass fire. We moved through 1,080 homes were destroyed. Thankfully, no lives lost that I can recall. But we didn't talk about ember cast there either, unless it was, but this time we saw ember cast become a thing. And it became something that people understood. And so I think we have to embrace that to get behavioral change about where you live and understanding where you live and what your building materials are and whether your home is safe from fire or not. Because even though the fire's over here and you think, oh, the fire's over there, it won't affect me. I'm 3 miles away. Guess what? Those embers, and I'm not talking charcoal, we're talking big. And Tony Maroney is here somewhere. I wish he would walk by. But Chief Maroney out of LA County, I watched him pick up embers and go, this is an ember. And 3 miles, you would have another ignition from this fire. This is the first time in our lifetimes that we're really embracing that concept where we can get some not only operational change and understanding, but getting people's attention in this environment where you're not safe because you're 3 miles away from the fire, right? Under these circumstances, under the variables we're seeing, under the climate change driven drought, the low humidity, all of these things that are happening and being sustained that are setting the right variables, the right conditions for these conflagrations to happen. Not wildland fire, and I'll let you give them the news in a minute, but not wildland fire, not wildland urban interface fire, and not even wildfire in our communities that we now are terming conflagration. We've not used that term for almost 100 years since the Chicago fire.
Yeah.
And so it has gone out of our textbooks. It's gone out of, I think it's coming back.
Great setting. And Mark, you actually get to deliver our concept with the news she's talking about because you deserve credit for the renaming of committee. However, I am also interested in post Dr. Lori's description. What does a fire chief do in recognition of the fact that this conflict, we got embers flying 3 miles in these wind-driven fires, which you get in your slopes as well. What does a fire chief do about that?
Well, great question. And I'd actually like to take it a little broader than what a fire chief does. I mean, historically, fire chief's job is to secure the resources to protect his community. So the easy thing for me to say would be, we need more firefighters. But as a fire service, we need to recognize that we can't stop conflagrations today. We couldn't stop conflagrations 100 years ago. Conflagrations, they're going to burn until they run out of fuel or the weather changes. And so we need to move away from this concept that the conflagration occurred because it was a suppression problem or not adequate suppression. Our wildfire, our WUI, our wildland, and our conflagration problem, we can't suppress our way out of it. So we need to have a different vision for the future. So we need to be thinking about how do we prevent those fires to start with, how do we have rapid suppression when it's still in the wildlands? And then when it comes into the community, we need to accept that we can have all the fire engines in the world. And you talk about LA City, LA County, two really, really big, really, really well-resourced and really, really well-trained organizations, and they can't stop that fire. And so you look at the rest of our country, which is primarily rural area, small fire departments, much less resources. So where I'm going with this is we need to think about solutions other than suppression. So we really, we need to go back to this concept and we've been talking about it for years, but we need to double down on this, that preventing conflagrations, it's a partnership situation. So, we need mitigation in the can't speak in the
None of us can.
landscape level, right? We need to mitigate those fuels. We need to mitigate our homes. And I saw this and I wish I could attribute it to the right person, but I can't, and ultimately, but the quote is, roughly spoken, is the person who ultimately decides whether their home survives a wildfire. It's not the fire chief. It's not a firefighter. It's the homeowner. It's the person who has
Absolutely.
responsibility for the built environment, who is going to give that home the chance to survive that ember cast, or if there's an adjacent structure burning that radiant heat. And there may, on a really good day, if the odds turn out right, there may be a firefighter there to stomp out some embers, to cut the deck off the house if the deck caught fire. But if you haven't planned for your home surviving that wildfire, wildland fire, WUI fire conflagration without a firefighter being there, you should expect that your home's going to burn to the ground.
Mark, I have a question. Is it the homeowner or is it the neighbors of the homeowner?
I think it's
Well,
both.
Yeah, great question. And we get into this whole discussion about shared risk, right? And maybe I'm taking this on a tangent that's different than you're thinking, but if somebody has 40 acres and their home burns in a wildfire, that's tragic for their family, and it's a loss, and it's not good. But societally, it's really not that big of a deal, right? That's why we have insurance. When your home burns and you're 2 houses down from mine, and your home causes Eric's home, what's between us, to burn, and that causes my home to burn, now we have this situation of shared risk. And so that's where we all need to be in this together. So the conversation's a little different in my mind in more rural and true suburban areas than it is in really highly developed and urban areas.
Yeah.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that concept, because the concept of shared risk is huge. And it's something that our insurers are looking at very, very deeply. So understanding the concept of fire insurance is going to take on a whole new perspective based on that. And it has around that. So flooding, not the same. Hurricane wind insurance, not the same. You can get insurance by yourself, but not for this one. Not for this
Yeah.
one. It depends on your neighbors.
Big topic.
Can I build on that just real
I was
quick?
going to ask you to build on it, so it's
So-
perfect.
So, there's been a lot of attention, especially in the West, about insurance. And, a lot of people are saying, this is a problem, and it is a problem, right? There's a lot of impacts of loss of insurance and increased costs, and it can impact the ability to get a mortgage, which can cause this cascade of property tax revenue and bonding capacity and everything else. But I think we as a fire service need to apply a different frame to the insurance issue. The kind of the story I'll tell is I really started heavily in the wildfire mitigation space in the mid-aughts, 2007, 2008, after a large wildfire destroyed a lot of homes in our community. And I remember being in a lot of meetings and saying, why are we as a fire department trying to push this issue alone? Why isn't the insurance company here with us as a partner? And so I think we need to really embrace this moment and say the insurance industry has become a partner. We're just having a hard time really reacting to the way that they're becoming a partner. So there are some really good opportunities to align, things like the mitigations that matter. So we make sure that we're telling people to do the things that the insurance companies are going to recognize, and they're going to protect the community. But it really is a time of opportunity. And again, I'll go back to kind of the CRR model. One of the E's in there is economic incentive. And so we really need to look at insurance as an economic incentive or an economic disincentive if you don't do the mitigation and you can't be insured. So I see it as, it's a fundamental shift in how we insure, but it's truly an opportunity.
And the insurance, you consider insurance a partner in this overall risk reduction. I think we do as a profession.
Absolutely. And I think, too often it's been framed as, big bad corporations. But ultimately they're in business, and I won't get into a whole insurance discussion, but you look across the US, over the last 10 years, in a lot of states, they've lost money, year after year after year.
Yeah.
So what they're really doing, and this term I steal from Frank Freeval, they're repricing risk to adequately reflect the new risk of our new fire environment.
Yeah. It seems like the insurance conversation is driving a lot of how we're thinking about community risk and fire, which is appropriate, but there's a consistent framework that you all for 4 years plus have probably talked through. You've been in a lot of rooms working with federal, state, local partners, non-governmental partners, and all of us at some point, some people might not know the term, but we agreed upon the cohesive strategy in the context of conflagrations. Are those three tenets still relevant? So, and we need to be safe and effective in response. I think we all agree with that. Community fire adaptation is a priority, and then healthy, resilient forests is sort of another priority. Is that still relevant?
So you're talking about the cohesive strategy,
Correct.
right? So the cohesive strategy, I think, is still relevant, but we have to put it in the proper context. So are the words accurate? Yes. But what's the context and the definition of those? So let's just say what you just said, resilient landscapes, right? So resilient landscapes, not resilient forest. We need landscapes, and there are three of them: wildland, interface, community. All of them need to be resilient. And some, that means fire proof or fire resistant, right? So that makes that a resilient landscape. So it's not about vegetation all the time. And then we get to fire adapted communities. That's the number two. So these fire adapted communities, that's not just hardening your homes, which means zone 0, 5 feet out, non-combustible, fire resistant, 30 feet out, no fences, no wooden decks, all of those things build out of something else. So it is a concept of fire adaptation when you know, and we now do know, where you have a likelihood of having wildfire in any of those landscapes, right? So we have to adapt to that area where we live, whether it's an imbercast zone, whether it's a direct fire zone, what all these zones exist, and we have that information. So we have to adapt. The third is an effective response. Now, when the other items fail, in the best case, Mark, and you just kind of alluded to it, the fire approaches, if it's a vegetative fire, and the interface will even say, and comes and hits the built environment and just stops because there's nothing to burn. That's our best case scenario. Would you agree? Because fire on some landscape is good. In the wildland, we need some fire to perpetuate, right? So we have to understand this in context. People tend to look at it 1, 2, or 3, one or the other, and they only care about their own. But this effective response is also free. We're not just talking about response to put out the fire. LA, I want to go back to that for 1 second. There were 9,000. Think about that for a second. 9,000 firefighters on this fire really early. LA County held over an entire shift. So that gave that, it's like 5,000 or something. I mean, it was a massive number. And then you're dealing with infrastructure and water. We all know the story. But everybody focused on that as the answer. That's not the answer. The answer was in the pre-response, which means boots on the ground. Yes, doing fuels mitigation. Yes, doing inspection and saying, that's not zone 0, get it out. You can't have your garbage cans here. You can't have that wood fence here. You can't have, and I saw it all over LA, privacy fences near, because they're packed in there, some of these homes, but then the vegetation growing on the privacy fence that they'd had drought now for months. So what does that look like? It's all dead vegetation. How fast was that going to burn? Fine fuels that quick. So this was the wick from one to the other. I don't care if that fence was stone. It's not going to make the vegetation growing on it. It's still going to give off, right, the radiant heat opportunity and the ember. So these are the kinds of things that I think, yes, is the cohesive strategy still valid? Absolutely, I believe it is. But we must put it in the context today. I want to go back one time. See, now I've got the microphone, Eric.
Go for it.
Continue.
I need to go back to one
Preach it,
thing.
sister.
I want to go back to one thing. Now you got me laughing. So insurance. Now you made me forget what I was going to say. No, I didn't. So insurance.
Sing the Canadian national
I do not want this voice singing. So on the insurance, we need to pay attention, because I think the insurers, you said, are they partners? That's without question. We need them not to walk away. The American Property Casualty Insurance Association, dear friend, who's the president and CEO of that, Dave Sampson, who I shout out to Dave, because he was on the Wildfire Commission with us under the Biden administration, where we had the best minds, I think, in the industry to talk about and bring forward recommendations. One of those recommendations was to have insurance recognize if you do home hardening, that they can adjust premiums, they can adjust. And if it's an HOA and they all do it together, then everybody gets the discounts. We have to do that. Why? Because when it comes back to, why do you want to own your own home? Why do you want to own your own home? Why? Because it's an asset for you, is it not?
Absolutely.
But if I own an asset that now is in an area that asset becomes the peril, because your house, that was your asset, just ignited his house, what good is your asset when the assets become the very fuel that mitigates the disaster? This is why we need insurance to step in and say, you will build in a fire resistant, and we need decision makers, the governors, the mayors. You will not build here, nor will we permit you unless it's fire resistant material. You will build to code here, full stop. Florida did it. Why is it such a problem? We do it for hurricane. Why can't we do it for fire? Because it might not look nice. Okay, you're going to rebuild it so it looks nice after it burns again? We have to also, stop paying out disasters that are duplicated. If it burned and then in 5 years it burned again, sorry. Right? If you are going to make those decisions after you have a disaster and allow people to build back something that's going to burn again, then you get no more relief when it burns again. We have to take these hard positions, and decision makers are going to have to step up and do that, or we're going to keep on with this perpetual behavior, and we're going to keep getting firefighters. This is what bottom line for me. We're going to keep putting firefighters in harm's way.
It's a big one. That is a bottom line.
Yeah, repetitive loss. I mean, that's,
Yes.
we sort of fixed it with flood,
Yes.
but we can't fix it with fire. And just to build on that a little bit, one of the problems with insurance is that it has, that shared risk with the insurance company, it lessens the blow. And if people really understood the consequence, losing everything, for most people, that's everything they own financially, then they'll start to make change. But right now, for most people, the consequence of a loss is not real enough, and it's not being realized. And I don't want to sound like I'm uncaring, but that's what it's going to take to make change at scale. and
I
protect our
absolutely
communities.
concur.
We have agreement.
I mean, it seems like I'm now raising a 5-month-old son, so I'm trying to figure out this whole parenthood thing. I know it's different as a kid, but the mindset of when we're trying to learn as humans, it's you can make a mistake once. We all make mistakes, but try not to make the same mistake twice. And again, if we're building these homes that are wildfire risk areas, and you're building in the exact same area, who's at fault there?
Exactly.
But I do like that. Are there conversations going on with insurance companies now about providing these kind of incentives where, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, and you do home hardening, you are actually going to have collected lower premiums for the HOA and individual? I would hope that seems extremely logical. So I would like to think that is happening. I haven't heard any conversations besides what I've heard today.
I've not heard of it. I hope it's happening also, but I can tell you what is happening is that we're seeing a lot of the insurers and reinsurers, right? And that's going to be the key. The reinsurers are stepping up, and they're doing a lot more robust risk assessments before they agree to insure. And they're leveraging algorithms, and it's almost a analytic swarm, if you've heard that term before, where it's multiple faceted analytics applied against a risk assessment of your home, because we don't have a fire risk index yet. And that is something that Rebecca Harned, who many of you know, has been hired by ULFSRI to really work on that fire risk index for the built environment, because we have a lot of variables we can apply, but we truly do not know when a wildfire hits a community, how to predict where it's going to go and what's the risk of your home burning, not that one. You've seen the one home standing. We saw it in Lahaina. You've seen a couple of them in the Palisades. Why that home didn't burn? That's what we're trying to understand. And it's not just because, oh, it's built with a metal roof. That's not it. So we need to understand wind dynamic. We need to understand all the things around that. So fire risk index, until we have that can be applied to your home, where it's sitting on that topography in that land area among these other homes. So it's all of these variables matter. Then we must apply some other makeshift analytics to do the best we can to inform risk so that insurer feels comfortable. And they're getting pretty good. Some of these reinsurers are getting pretty good with their risk assessment and allowing insurance to move forward.
And if I could build on that,
Mhm.
so I think we're really on a cusp of a big significant change. There's a lot of efforts. Dr. Lori mentioned the work with UL. Dr. Hassan Mahmood out of CSU has a really good model of the agonon.
He's out of Vanderbilt now, by the way.
Yeah, I can't remember, so I said CSU, but yeah, and good for him. He's doing amazing things. His model is super accurate. He's overlaid it over Lahaina and Marshall and some other fires. And his model is about 88% of effective at predicting loss. So that's really good. There's some other efforts, the WUI insurance alignment, which is really insurance companies, fire chiefs, state insurance commissioners agreeing on the mitigations that matter. And that resulting in maybe not lower premiums, but continued insurability. And kind of a sister project to that is the WUI Data Commons that's just in the pilot phase. That's going to really help make mitigation visible in two ways. And, the insurance company sees what the homeowner, the community is doing, and the property owner understands what the insurer is looking at. Then of course, wildfire prepared home and wildfire prepared neighborhood. So I think we're really on the cusp of just a lot of change. And I did want to go back just to one thing on kind of this concept of the risk and the shared risk. And again, I truly think we need to change the way we think. And I saw this post the other day on LinkedIn, and but I don't want to. I want to be sensitive and empathetic. People tell me I'm not very empathetic, so I want to work on that. But if you light a fire in the forest or any wildlands, right? That's a crime. But if your home burns my house down, you're just another victim. And again, I don't want to be unempathetic to other victims, but we view those.
Got to look at that.
We view those two things totally differently. And maybe they're not so dissimilar, if if your home burns mine down because you willfully, and I'll make it dramatic, and wantonly, or however the lawyers say that, you say that, don't mitigate your home and it burns my house
Or
down,
ignore.
or ignore recommendations. Is that different than you lighting a fire in the wildlands and it burns into the community? That's maybe a little heavy for an 8x8 booth at 2 p.m, but that's worth
the reality.
I think that's our reality. And I think you're onto something there. If you put it in the context, and I know this is really a far stretch, but I'm going to put it in the context of active shooters. The last few active shooters we've had, when they went after the parent who bought the gun,
Sure.
Right? And then we begin to see maybe some change. So I know that's a big stretch, but I think that holding people responsible when we told them there are building codes. We told you to heart, yes, it's expensive, but how expensive is it to lose your whole house? Or to not be able to have a mortgage at all because you can't get insurance. So we have to really have some reality around these concepts of responsibility. And you hit on it earlier. Individual responsibility would have made all the difference in the Palisades and Eaton fire becoming a disaster or not. Anything that was going to change the outcome of that had to have been done long before the ignition. That response was not going to change it. If we'd had all the water in the ocean to be able to apply to it, was not going to change. I talked to the firefighters on the ground that day. I was there 12 hours after the ignition. I was on the ground. Chief Maroney said, come, we went. I talked to them. They said, we had water. I had full force. I couldn't get it on the fire. The wind was taking the water. So these are the kinds of concepts that we cannot have or say it's all response. We've got to get in front of it.
Fascinating risk discussion. So going to change a little bit because we can't speak with you two and not talk just quickly about what's happening in fire tech. What's happening with technology in the space of wildland fire. Dr. Lori?
Fire?
Wildland fire. Wildfire. Wildfire. This is 2 corrections in 1. Good job.
And I'll parlay this to lay off, give a little layup to you, Lori, about a presentation that you started yesterday and something that I was fascinated by in the article we were talking about what are some tertiary industries that we can learn from in terms of how they are using technology and how we can rip off and duplicate in some capacity. And I was very fascinated by this F1 article talking about the amount of data, the amount of technology. And granted, we know that maybe the fire service doesn't have the the funding that some of these F1 teams do, but there are things that we can learn and apply. But maybe just to start there from curious on the F1 dynamic in terms of what the fire service can learn from F1. And then we'll get into a little bit about some technology trends that you both are seeing.
Kevin, I love that. And Kevin, you're the one who sent me the article. Kevin knows I'm a huge Formula One fan.
Layup.
Oh my goodness. It was awesome. And Kevin sent me the article and he goes, oh, I thought about you when I read this. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And it was right at the moment I was actually preparing for the AI workshop that I'm going to do here tomorrow, using AI for fire chiefs. And we'll practice a little bit. So if you're watching this, join me. But Kevin sent me this article and it's incredible because Formula One is probably the top industry using this human machine interaction with AI. And they have over 600 sensors on these cars. A couple of hundred they remove after they run the initial testing of the car. And these cars have to be literally reassembled every time they change continents. And so these sensors matter. And so they'll run the track with the sensors and then they'll create a digital twin and continue. They'll run billions of races with that same, trying to sort out. Well, digital twinning itself saves the fuel, it saves, right? So they built a capability to run races in a virtual environment that's so accurate. Then they'll remove some of the heavier sensors and then run the car because it's lighter weight, obviously, and appropriately so. But they gather so much data, they then have to use AI because they're only allowed by rules to use 6% of the data they generate. 6%. And so now they've got to use AI to tell them which pieces of data are priority for them on that particular weekend, that particular race. So these are the concepts. And then the drivers are monitored. The health and safety of the drivers, the body temperature, their heart rate, their respiratory rate, all of these things. And it's analyzing their breath. It's doing all of these things to talk about the health of the driver while they're in this vehicle. And the car reacts to their body temperature, to their breath analysis. And so the car is reacting to them through this whole thing. So I love the article, but we can learn so much. Can you imagine monitoring firefighters? And we've tried to do it. We know we've had some, the heat core heat temperatures that we monitored on firefighters by, swallowing some of the monitors from NASA, right? But imagine if we could do it with the turnout gear they're wearing, right? That the actual monitoring is in the PPE. Right. And where their face mask is monitoring their exhalation, not just for respiratory rate. What's the content if they're breathing off, too much, alkalinity or what is happening in the chemistry of their breath to let you know maybe they didn't eat and they've been in there for a while before they went in this fire. Maybe they got a call and they hadn't eaten. Now they're in a little bit of keto, right? So these are the kinds of things that we're watching that I think are the art of the possible, Kevin, that we start brainstorming and thinking, what is F1 doing that we can apply? Running an apparatus, putting it through all kinds of different things, create a digital twin and keep running, right? I mean, think about the art of the possible here. So I think we have, in a lot of our industries, AI is really going to be something we can leverage.
Fantastic.
And I guess now to continue this technology conversation, I'll throw it to you, Mark, and then Lori, if you want to build on it. But different technology that you see within the wildland,
Wildfire.
Wildfire.
I've messed everybody up.
In all landscapes. Wildfire and also landscapes. Okay.
And then I've been very intrigued by the rise of all things satellite for early detection, the integration and use of drones for autonomous response in some capacity, whether it's putting some type of extinguishment on the fire or whether it's just kind of quick eyes on the sky, drone satellites or something else. What are some different technology trends that you're seeing, Mark, that are catching your attention that are either there today or something that you see in the next 1-5 years that might really be a force multiplier within the work you're doing?
Well, great question. And my answer is yes, all the above, right? I mean, there is so much happening. It's amazing time in the wildfire space. For years, we felt like there wasn't any investment in technology in the wildfire space, and now it's flooding in, which is actually, it's great, but it's actually a little bit of a challenge. And I'll build on what Dr. Lori said about F1's only using 6% of the data. I think, when we think about the fire service and specific to wildfire, we're using 6% of the tech and we're also using 6% of our data.
Agree.
So we're seriously underutilized. So I think what I see is, maybe it's not exactly the question you asked, but what do I see the possibility? I mean, it really starts getting into the vision of, the Land Fire Alliance, or,
Earth Fire Alliance.
Earth Fire Alliance, Earth Land Close. Being able to detect fires on a short-term interval anywhere in the world and have a suppression, that's the second part of like the X Prize, is have, innovative novel suppression there. So, whether that ends up looking like drones or something else, I think there's a ton of opportunity there. But my vision actually goes a little bit further. And we talked earlier about the cohesive strategy, and Dr. Lori very appropriately identified that, the only way we get ourselves out, and we're not sure what out is, of our wildfire problem, is that we need mitigation at a landscape scale, a very large landscape scale. And that's going to include not only prescribed fire, but that's going to include using fire and managing fire to mitigate, right? So, and a lot of people oversimplify this and say, let it burn doesn't work. And where I'm going with this is we need to be able to use our detection, and then our compute to be able to predict where fires are going to be, not in hours. That's where we're at now. We can get a pretty good model of what it's going to do in 2 hours and 4 hours and maybe 24 hours. But we need to be predicting that not in hours, not in days, but in weeks, so that we can truly, at the appropriate times of the year, and I emphasize appropriate, allow fire to burn or manage the intensity and manage the perimeters so that we can allow fire to return to its natural function. So that to me is kind of the amalgamation of all those techs together: detection, suppression capability, compute, decision support tools, modeling. That's the holy grail that we need to be headed towards in the wildfire space.
I concur. And I think if I were to put it in the context, if I may, I love what you just said. It's the before, the during, and the after is where tech is going to be engaged. And I think what Mark is saying is that a lot of this, the tech that we are now using in the during, the ignition, detection, all of those sorts of things can be leveraged to help the before. So we need the tech that's doing the large scale fuel mitigation. We need the tech that can, help harden the homes. We need those things that can happen, but we also need the detection. We need the capability to see early, because it's just like, and I often try to describe it to, even new recruit firefighters, it's just like you're being taught about limiting the fire to the room of origin. The faster you can get to it and stop it from spreading beyond the room of origin, the better our chances that nobody's going to get injured, or killed. So we have to understand wildfire in the same space. If I can get to a spot fire before it spread, that's why our fire satellite or our Fire Alliance satellites are going to matter. That low Earth observation, that's why our detection, the cameras, the sniffing AI sensors, all of those things are going to matter. We can put fire on the land if I have a way to control the perimeter, know if it gets out of control, and use our intelligence to manage that ignition properly. So fighting fire with fire, yes, we need to do that within the company, leveraging tech to keep it safe and intelligent.
Mark, Lori, we could listen to this for hours, but we're going to respect your time. And so I'm going to close out and then hand it over to Kevin and just say, I appreciate everything you all bring to the table. It's fast
Did we
and it's fun. It is over an hour at this point, right? So I'm going to thank you, and I'm passing it to Kevin to close us out.
I was saying that door actually only it locks from the outside, so you can't even get out. So no, we're obviously due for another one. No, I guess I want to say thank you both, and it's always a pleasure. And Laura, I always jokingly say, but I feel like I want to run through a brick wall every time after we have a conversation.
Oh,
So
Kevin, thank
thank
you.
you for the continued passion and fire and all this. But I actually guess we'll throw it back to you, Eric, for your final questions. But I'm looking forward to both the responses.
Yeah. And this is very quick. I'm going to ask both of you, of what are you most proud?
I thought we were done. So
No,
Mark.
almost done.
Yeah, that's a tough question, especially sitting next to a preeminent leader in the fire space, Dr. Lori. I think, I guess I'll simplify it a little bit, but you enter the fire service and you think about it very simplistically, like, I'm gonna, be a firefighter, I'm gonna promote through some ranks. And I think what I'm proud about is that I've had this incredible opportunity throughout my career to work with great people to help make our communities safer places, more resilient to wildfire. really change our communities. And again, that's, and I really want to emphasize that those have all been collaborative efforts, and had that opportunity in a couple different communities. And I know, it's always one of the tough questions, why is mitigation and prevention maybe not as satisfying sometimes as suppression? Suppression, you charge down the hall, the fire goes out. But you don't always get to know the loss, the human impact, the community impact that you've prevented when you've done those other things. And so it's been really an honor to work with great people like the folks in this room, and change the trajectory of our wildfire problem. So that's been really cool.
Right. Thank you, Mark.
I love
Dr.
that,
Lori.
Eric. And thank you for what you do. You and Eric are really, your voices and your reputations are making such a difference. So thank you both for what you're doing. And then Kevin, that goes without saying, you are changing the environment around tech talk. And I say that because I know not only is it a podcast, but you really are the fresh breath that you bring to the fire service, and hold them accountable for saying, you got to look at this, and you make them do that. And so I love what the three of you are bringing, and it's such an honor to sit and talk with you. So to your question, I think I would have to go back to where we started, and that is to be able to watch a trajectory of something that I literally worked on for 20 years, and to ultimately never dream of an opportunity to be the top fire official in the nation, and to be sitting in the seat to actually make that change. Who knew? I didn't know 20 years, plus ago, that opportunity would ever, that would present itself. And yet it did. And Nearest is, I lose my words sometimes, because I'm just so proud of the team, the people who have been involved in it, who are bringing the vision I had 20 years ago and work toward all of it to this fruition, and watch them do it. It's amazing. And you just give them the vision and they go. I want to call out, if I may, Dr. Craig Weinshank. So Craig, I used to call him Doogie Howser. Now that'll be wasted on a lot of people who weren't around for Doogie, right? But Craig completed his doctorate really early. He was trained under DK Azakoya down at Austin. And it was just, I can name for you step by step by step by step. But Craig, who worked with me on the NIST studies, he was training as a postdoc at NIST. He worked with me on the low hazard crew size. He worked with me on the high rise crew size, if you're familiar with the NIST studies. Who knew that Craig Weinshank would then be evolved? He'd go over to UL and work with Madrukowski and Kerber and do what he does. And then he's the one that's in place. When I trained him and we had all these conversations about data years before, he's the project manager for Nearest. So the way, and I attribute it, everybody knows me, knows I'm a huge faith that, I think God puts people in your path at the right time, and then it's full circle. Sometimes you get to see these things happen, and that's what's happened with Nearest. I've watched a team that for 20 years worked on this, and then that team is a lot of new people coming in, but that core team is still there. And Nearest, I think, will be all of our legacies and carry the fire service forward. So I know that was a long answer.
Perfect. Kudos to you, and
So,
kudos to your team.
Kudos to the team.
Yep.
I'm so proud of them.
This is great. I think we got to do this again. Maybe run it back. I don't know, tomorrow.
Cheers, y'all.
Thank you so much. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having us.
Thanks.